r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. Serious, people who have been the target of murderers assassins. How did you survive? And why did they target you? I'm not sure if it counts, but a few years ago in high school, there was this guy that used to trouble everyone by taking naked photos of them when they were changing after PE class. I happened to be one of his targets, so I reported him to my teacher, and eventually he got suspended for about a month and had to attend counseling sessions. One day I was at the bus stop waiting for my bus when suddenly I felt a push on my back and I fell onto the road. Luckily for me, the bus driver stopped the bus in time and I survived. However, I fell directly on my arm and it was fractured. Last I heard, he went to the juvenile center and no one ever had to see this devil again. Oh yeah, this counts. He pushed you in front of a ducking bus. What a ducking creep. No way to prove it, but had all the lug nuts on my truck's front passenger rim loosened, which caused death wobble so bad I almost crashed in the fast lane of the freeway. Luckily the rim stayed on. I had ghosted this one guy and part of me suspects he came and loosened my lug nuts in retaliation. My boss discovered it being the nice guy he was. Same happened to my cousin over a girl. He died though. Edited to say, thanks, y'all, for the sympathy. This actually happened when I was too young to remember my teenage cousin. But I do remember how torn up my aunt and grandma were at the funeral. I only added this to the comment above to say, yeah, loosened lug nuts are hella dangerous and nearly impossible to prove. Nobody did jail time for my cousin's death, though I'm very surprised my family didn't avenge it on their own terms. They missed. That's about the only reason. It was a random act of violence. A man ran up behind me, put a gun to my head and shot. He flinched, or I did, and he missed by an inch. Blew out my left eardrum and burned my hair behind my ear. He ran off immediately after. Cops said it was probably a gang initiation thing. I have deafening tinnitus now and horrible anxiety in public. Whoa. In what country? I've posted about this before. I was in a really bad, abusive relationship. He had many mental issues along with diabetes. This doesn't excuse any of it, as he was aware of what his body was doing and he never got help. But it's important to know it didn't exactly come out of the blue. One night, he seemed bored and started trying to stick his feet in my face. I pushed them away, disgusted, and he exploded. It was a whole lot of action. He started by trying to choke me. I freed myself by grabbing a cat brush, the kind with the sharp metal points, and pushing it into his chest. He let me go but pushed me to the ground and lifted his airsoft rifle and drove it to my head like he was trying to cave in my skull. At the last moment he hesitated. I ran out of the apartment and called the cops. It didn't occur to me until later when I was with a public defender documenting my injuries that he had really wanted to kill me. I had bruising so deep they were black in color. In places I don't even remember him hitting me. He really would have, if something in him hadn't hesitated. Did you find out why he hesitated? And hopefully he's in prison forever. About a year ago, I was walking my dog at night when I saw this really beat up old Honda Civic pull up on the other side of the road. I noticed that two similar cars positioned themselves on the roads perpendicular to me, both behind and in front of me. I was boxed in. This kid no older than 19 gets out with two other people, and the kid reaches for a gun in his waistband and makes a beeline towards me. A random car passes and they all scatter. Once the car is gone, they come back and try to do the same thing. But another random car passes again, and they take off. I made the quarter-mile run home in about 2 minutes. My guess is I was the victim of a gang initiation, and they ran away when witnesses saw. Edit. I've been getting a lot of comments about how I'm a slow runner. My dog is old and I have knee and back injuries from years ago. Sorry, I'm a turtle, I guess, lol. What state was this, if you don't mind telling? It's scary, I'm hearing more gang initiation stories. Not sure if this counts as I wasn't the intended target, but my dad ran a chapter of a fairly notorious biker gang, notorious enough to get their own episode of Gangland. Once my dad left, a guy who never really liked him all that much took his place and insisted that since he was no longer in the gang, he needed to get rid of his tattoo. My dad told him to go pound sand. Surprisingly, that didn't go over particularly well, and he ordered his SUV bombed. We lived in an apartment complex at the time and they blew up the wrong SUV. Thankfully no one was inside either. As far as I know, that was the only attempt on his life. At least as long as I was alive. Hol up. My ex-boyfriend hired some guy from Chicago to murder me after I broke up with him for selling drugs to my younger sister. Fortunately, my ex and I both had a mutual friend who found out and had more pull with the attempted assassin. Both were Polish immigrants. Ex calls me up later and demands $2,000 from me because he didn't get what he paid for, as the hired gun wouldn't give a refund. And then you called the cops. As you should have. Right? I was on an almost school shooters list. Me and my friend tried to befriend a kid with pretty bad Asperger's. He was known to have horrible anger management issues, always got in a lot of trouble and was somewhat infamous, but we thought he deserved at least a couple friends. The plan was to just kinda sit with him at lunch and apart from that carry on with our lives as normal. But being he had very little social skills, never had friends and no boundaries, he didn't know how to handle it. Very sad. He would come up to us at bad times while I was at practice, talking to girls or teachers, and would message us online day and night. We tried to have a talk with him about boundaries and how friends give each other space etc, but this just made him feel rejected and infuriated him. He became more obsessed and more persistent. Around this time I got my first girlfriend and started hanging out with her at school, so my other friend was the one who had handled it more than I did. A few weeks later found the kid try beat the shit out of my friend. He got stopped by other kids and the campus police officers. He was expelled and sent to a school for people with disabilities. I was honestly relieved he would be somewhere more equipped to help him. After that I kinda just forgot about it. About 3 months later I got called into the administration office and walked into a room with the dean of students and a police officer. I started panicking because in those days I smoked a lot of weed and thought I might have gotten caught. Last I heard the kid got help and figured it out and is going to college. He actually messages me happy birthday every year. I don't respond. Good on you for at least trying to make friends with him. At that point it's a lost cause, though. I was almost murdered. If it wasn't for my manager I would have been. My sister set me up on a date with her friend. I ended up having to work the weekend so I cancelled. The date went out with someone else and afterwards invited him to her apartment. Right before they went inside someone killed them both with a gun. It turned out to be a jealous neighbor of the girl who she was also messing with. That could have been me if I went on the date and she decided to let me in for tea. Edit. Found the article about the incident. Still remember the call cancelling the date. It's sad. Google.com link. Some sick people in the world. My father was involved, as competition to them, with Russian mafia in Finland in the 90s. He sold weapons, did some protection services, loan sharking and other stuff. He ended up killing someone connected pretty high up to Russia and got a hit on his head. Being his only son I was in danger as they couldn't get to my father. Me and my mother moved across the country under a different name. They ended up kidnapping my father's then wife. Took her to woods and shot her. This was a pretty big deal since the Russian mafia had a strict rule not to usually do hits on women or children. Shit man. I'm so sorry. Is your father safe now? Not sure if this one counts, but I was born in Iraq at the very start of the war. My parents tried shielding us from the war and death outside, but sometimes things just happened the likes of which they had no control over. I was about 5 years old. I can't remember my exact age, but all I can remember is that I was too young to attend elementary school. My mom was getting my siblings ready for school, brushing my sister's hair, and I was sitting on her tailoring bench with a curtain-less window behind me. I remember playing around with some pins she had laying around. My grandma, alive at the time, was watching over me so I do not fall. Thus when a pin dropped from my hand to the floor she was quick to tell me to pick it up so no one would step on it. I bend down to pick up the pin and I hear a pop, similar to the popping sound of a balloon. I glance back and the window was gone. And all I hear next is my sister scream and start crying. My mom quickly yelled for all of us to get against the wall and to get away from the window. As we all look around the room to see what happened, we see a bullet, as long as our index finger, in the middle of the room. One of my brothers goes over to pick it up, but it was too hot to touch. The next day we go over to the police and all they can do is tell us that it was a sniper bullet and they can't do anything about it. I assume that a sniper saw me just sitting there in front of a window and took the shot. But it missed me when I bent down to pick up the pin, so it went over my head, grazing my sister's arm before stopping on the floor. That is some insane divine intervention if ever I heard it. But what kind of person would try and shoot a 5-year-old child? I was a photojournalist in an unnamed Central American country doing humanitarian coverage for a college. Suddenly there were riots against the government and officials started shooting people with cameras. My group was chased, so I had to change my appearance, that is, clothes, hat, satchel, and ditch my camera to an in-country contact and acted like a normal student to smuggle my SD cards in little slots I cut in my shoes until I got to the US, where I took them out and just had them in my pocket so to not arouse suspicion by tsar. 10/10 would do again. Edit grammar and spelling. So Nicaragua or Honduras. It wasn't a murderer, but I was on a hit list of a student at my school a few months back. I was put there because I was a good friend of everyone else on the list. The police came to my house and asked me questions about them. Overall it's ducked up. Edit clear things up. The reason he had a hit list in the first place was not because of bullying, it was his parents and he needing to take out his anger on others. Also the people on the list were his other friends. He had several mental illnesses that could have made it worse. There was someone at our school who made a hit list. I wasn't on it, but it was a big ordeal. Not sure if attempted murder. Well, probably. Guy ran me over while I was on a bike because I was texting with his girlfriend. I didn't even know they had a relationship. Dumb me didn't call the cops and let my uncle handle it. Wish I just pressed charges. What do you mean your uncle handled it? Was he a veteran or something? I can actually answer this. I lived below an insane person. In a shared house. For the record, I lived there first. Insane person wanted the entire house to rent. Tried to force me out many ways. Making noise. Having people creep around and knock on my windows. Call the cops on me for no reason, etc. So one day he lit a smoldering fire in the non-functional fireplace. We were told never to use it and closed his off, forcing the smoke to fill my apartment. We luckily got out. But the hospital said one more hour in there and we would be dead. Me and my husband spent several hours in the hospital on oxygen. My dad had replaced our smoke detector literally 2 weeks prior to this incident, as we discovered it was broken. Since the laundry was in my part of the house. Insane person could totally have come in and tampered with it, but I have no evidence of this. The funniest part of the whole thing was when I called 911 and the fire trucks showed up at 3 AM. Insane person cussed me out for calling them. The second funniest part was work tried to get me to come in that day since nobody could cover my shift. All that effort to rent out a teardown house in a sketchy neighborhood. And that's why people shouldn't give a fuck about their employer. This girl who thought knew me messaged me on Instagram. Even though we never met, we continued talking. Turns out she had a boyfriend who went to my school and he threatened to kill me if I didn't block her. He actually brought a knife to school that day too. Nothing happened to me. While the kid with the knife was expelled after a teacher saw the knife in his backpack. This brought back a memory. My GF in high school had a guy that had a crush on her. She told me he made her feel uncomfortable when he was around. So I very politely sent him a message asking him to stop and explained everything. I call off school cause I'm a slacker. Next thing I know, I wake up to my mom saying the cops are here, saying I'm at the school in a trench coat with a knife going to stab this kid. Nothing happened, but really. WTF. I still don't understand his plan on that one. While it seemed strange at the time, I actually didn't find out about the circumstances until 20 years later. I worked at the White House during the Clinton administration in an IT capacity. And was traveling on a trip to the Philippines and the APEC conference in Jakarta, Indonesia. We had flown into Manila late and hopped on the bus to the hotel with the staff motorcade. Everyone was pretty awake and we were all beasing on the ride to the hotel. About 45 minutes into the ride, I look out the window of the bus and we are on a narrow road lined by corrugated tin shacks. It really seemed strange at the time, since why would the road from the airport to the nice hotels in Manila have to go through this neighborhood? We eventually arrived at the hotel, and it was quickly forgotten. 20 years later, I am watching a series on the History Channel about the United States Secret Service. This one episode was about how the Secret Service coordinates with intelligence agencies, and talked about on a Clinton trip to Manila where they overheard Al Qaeda was talking about a wedding cake under the bridge. Wedding cake was a known code word for bomb. Clinton was diverted to the alternate route and undoubtedly got to the hotel a lot quicker than we did. It turns out there was indeed a bomb under the bridge on the route to the hotel. I was obviously not the target, but it was crazy, and many of us could have been collateral damage. This story was wild. Thanks for sharing. I think this will work. That's my boy looking too cute for words. imgur.com link. Ducking, like and subscribe.